Okay, so thank you again for joining us for the first webinar of our new Planning Ahead series, hosted by the UCSF Neuro-Oncology Gordon Murray Caregiver Program. My name is Elle Woodall, and I'm the coordinator for the program. So basically, we've heard from caregivers over the years that just when you think you have things figured out, something else changes. And caregivers really want to know what to expect and how to be prepared for any changes that might arise. So basically, our goal of this series is to provide you with practical information on topics that will be useful to you in your role as a caregiver and aid you in planning ahead. So tonight, we'll be discussing safely caring for your loved one at home. As I'm sure many of you would agree, caring for someone with a brain tumor can be one of the most challenging things you have ever done. Not only is your loved one facing a serious illness, but it's an illness that impacts their brain, which has the potential to impact their ability to move, speak, and sometimes their thinking and ability to execute a task. So what do you need to know to be prepared in case your loved one experiences mobility impairments, loses strength, or has trouble coordinating their movements? These are kind of the things we're going to go over today, and our hope is to give you some tips and skills on how to safely assist someone should these changes arise, as well as keep you safe and keep you from hurting yourself while assisting your loved one. So I wanted to introduce our panelists for tonight. First, we have Ron Blessinger, a physical therapist and program manager from Rehab Without Walls, an organization specializing in home and community rehabilitation. We have Asa Williams, an occupational therapist from Rehab Without Walls. We have Marty Beene, a former caregiver guest speaker, who will be sharing a bit about his own personal experience. And then also present and available to answer questions during the Q&A panel at the end are our two neuro-oncology caregiver nurses, Margaretta Page and Lisa Guthrie. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here with us tonight. First of all, Marty, I wanted to turn it over to you first and ask you a couple questions. If you could give us a brief summary of your caregiver experience and let us know what makes this topic important to you, and when did you realize you needed further guidance to provide safe care?
Sure, yes. So indeed, my name's Marty Beene, and I am a former caregiver. My wife, Pamela Boyes, passed away in late July of last year, 2019, from glioblastoma. She had 3 surgeries in 2016, 2017, and then 2018. She actually went back to work after the first two surgeries, and it was physically pretty much okay until mid to late 2018. And that was about the same time that her cognitive skills declined enough she had to stop working. And then eventually in June of 2019, she started hospice care and became completely unable to walk or anything. So really the trickiest part was that sort of in-between part, from say mid 2018 until she started hospice care, when she was still mobile, but she was declining. Those skills were declining. So my experience as a caregiver, so I actually come from an engineering background. So I actually use some of that skill at times, trying to figure out ways to do things. She was having trouble getting into beds. First our antique bed, which was really high, and then a different bed that was a little bit lower. So I actually built a ramp that she could walk up to get her a little bit higher and into the bed a little bit better. There were some times when she fell. Fortunately, she didn't ever injure herself falling, but it was very hard to get up. So I sort of modified something I found on YouTube where I was able to get her to sit on something really short and then a little bit taller, a little bit taller, a little bit taller until she was high enough that she could actually stand up. So that was that engineering thing that was helpful in some ways, but actually in a way it made things harder, because what happened was, and Elle just referred to it, that you have these cognitive changes that really affect your mobility. And so the problem is with my engineering sort of logical way of thinking, but you can't actually engineer your way out of that. That was a real challenge. So this topic is important to me because what I found over the years of doing this was that there are actually ways to help with mobility issues and that can make things a lot better. So I found anything I can do to help get that word out might make things better, both for the patient and for the caregiver. And that last thing, so when did I realize I needed further guidance and some more help? And the easiest answer is later than I should have. So one of the things that was going on was that Pamela really kept her personality and her demeanor really until very late. So it was very easy to have a sense of denial about what she could safely do, including things like getting into a car, getting from the bed to the bathroom, or even just sitting down in a chair. So it's that, it was that part in between that she was really mobile and everything and able to do that. And most of the stuff that I think, especially Ron and Asa are going to be talking about today, is that sort of in between where the person is pretty mobile, but they need some help to be safe. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron, and he's going to start to talk about some of the movement strategies.
There we go. Thanks, Marty, and thanks for allowing Asa and I to come in tonight and provide some of our expertise and discuss some of the stuff that we do. We both work for Rehab Without Walls. Rehab Without Walls is a neuro rehab program that sees patients in their home, and we do a lot of community reentry. So we'll see primarily neurological patients, so people that have had strokes, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries. We'll meet them in the home, and we'll provide rehab services to get them safe and moving better. And in addition to that population, we certainly see some folks who with glioblastoma, sometimes with other progressive neurological disorders, Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis or various others. And so we always look at this at the same time we're trying to get people better. We also find ourselves having that conversation. Well, what are you going to do when things progress the other way, when things get harder? And what's that progression look like, and how can you plan for that? So that's a very hard conversation for Asa and I to have with our patients and with our families sometimes. And I think we really applaud this group and you all for being here and being willing to go there and talk about that. I think when we look at movement strategies and how do you help someone move, Marty comes at it from a really engineering approach and some really brilliant ideas on how to help his wife, how he was helping his wife maintain some mobility and maintain and keep safe. Asa and I look at it from more of a biomechanical standpoint and what's possible from both a mobility standpoint and from a cognitive standpoint. And there's some real similarities across most humans on how they move. So we look at normal movement patterns are really consistent. So how you stand up is the same as how your neighbor stands up. How you get out of bed is probably very similar to how your neighbor gets out of bed. Usually the best way to assist someone is to have them run through those normal movement patterns. So a lot of times when you're helping someone stand up, get out of bed, transfer from one position to another, employing those same movement patterns helps. So in order to do that, you have to have a plan. You have to kind of look at how people really move normally and help them move in that same manner. Some of the cognitive deficits that we've talked about or executive functioning deficits we run into that are really problematic is a lot of our patients have a really hard time processing the words we say. So if I try to have somebody stand up and I explain the whole thing very, very in depth, this is what you have to do, and throughout 10 steps, my patients are never going to process that. I need to keep it simple. I need to keep it 1 to 2 word commands when I'm helping someone move. We always find that to be a lot more effective. Our patients can process it a lot quicker. We try to communicate through our hands and our hand placement more so than we do with our voices. We are always aware of some of our patients having some impulsivity problems. That is, they'll move faster than what you're ready to have them move, and it adds to some safety issues. And a lot of times our caregivers, when we're training caregivers, they are intent on helping their loved one get up, move, transfer to the next spot. And we really try to instill in them, you have to wait for the patient to make that move. So give them a cue, give them a few word verbal cue, give them a little bit of a cue with your hands on how you want them to move, and then you wait for it. You wait till that patient or your loved one initiates the movement, and then you help them guide through that movement instead of actually trying to lift them wherever possible. I think the other thing is when you're talking with your hands, humans don't have handles. There's nowhere to really hang on to help someone stand up. So you want to really think about where do your hands go to really convey what you want to tell them to do. And most of the time, and you'll see this with some of the video vignettes that we have coming up, is we try to get our hands on their pelvis or their shoulder blades. Those are the foundations of human movement. Most major muscle groups attach either to your pelvis or your scapula. And if you have your hands there, you have a whole lot more control on where that patient or your loved one is moving. We sometimes will use transfer belts or gait belts. We'll use other devices as well. And those can be helpful, but we really like to get hands on the patient to help them out. Next. There we go. One of the first things we usually look at for when we're training someone, our caregivers to help someone, is how to move someone in bed. So how do you scoot in bed? How do you move from lying down to sitting up? And we really pay a lot of attention to where our caregivers' hands are, where their hand placement is, just like I said before. So as we watch this video, I really pay attention to where I put my hands on Asa here, who happens to be our model for this evening for a bunch of these vignettes. And I don't know if we're going to have audio with this, so if we don't, you'll have to listen. I'll have to talk you through it. So initially, what we're going to do is we're going to have Asa move from one side of the bed to the other. So we're going to help her. I'm seeking to have some video. There we go. We're going to have her move from one side of the bed to the other. And when we start this, I'm going to bend both of her knees up. I'm assuming one of her legs is probably weaker than the other. I'll put my hands right there on her knees. And with my right hand, I'll give her a little bit of a tug, and I'll ask her to lift her bottom. So we're going to just do a bridge. And I wait for her to lift that bottom before we move anywhere. And this is an exercise we'll a lot of times employ to not only to try to get patients stronger, but to get them moving a little bit better. I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty here. Our video seems to be stopping, so bear with us. And right now up, and then I have her move her bottom over, and I guide her feet over one at a time. I get at her shoulder blades here, and she does a little sit up. I'm waiting up, and I guide her over. I'm not lifting. Again, feet over, bridge, shift your hips, hand at her back, at her shoulder blades, and I'm waiting and I'm guiding. I'm not lifting. And I'm doing as little as I can, partly because I'm lazy and partly because I really want her to do the work. Watch my hand placement here, right at her knees, stabilizing her. My other hand's at her pelvis. You can't really see it in this video, but I'm trying not to be in a position where I have to do much lifting at all. And so here we go. We're going to try to see if Asa can get up on the side of the bed. So she's lying down, waking up in the morning. One knee up. We bring both knees up, hands on her knees. As she comes over, I put my hand on her hand on her belly, so I know where it is. We don't. She's got a weak arm. I don't want that to get caught underneath of her. We come over to the side. My hand's on her pelvis, right there. My other hand goes. So one hand on her pelvis, she comes all the way onto her side. She's not halfway there. She's all the way onto her side. Her ear is down on the bed, because if that'll make it a lot easier for me when I go to try to help her come up. Take a look at where I have my right hand there. It's going to go right on the top of her pelvic bone, right on the crest of her pelvis. and my other hand will go at her shoulder blade, and I push down, and she comes right up. I'm telling her to sit up, and we'll do this several times. So my verbal command is sit up, and when she lies back down, we actually reverse that. So sit up, and there she is. So that's how we usually teach our patients how to get up, especially if they have some weakness on one side or the other. This time I have my hand underneath of her. If she's a little bit weaker, I have to keep her forward. As she goes back down, she doesn't lie down backwards like that, because then she's going to be real heavy for me and I'm going to have a hard time. She's going to go down to her side, right down. So it's going to be down on her elbow, her shoulder, and her ear. So elbow, shoulder, ear, I'm right at her back. And then I may have to reach down there and help her with the feet, and then she rolls in. So I don't let her roll backwards. I keep her on her side before she's ready to lie down. So watch this one again. Elbow, shoulder, on her ear, hands at her pelvis and her scapula. There she is. So that is how we usually teach people to get up and down who are weak and not moving well. I'm saying a lot right now, but I usually keep my mouth shut when I'm working with my patients so they can listen to what we're saying. So, Marty, what can you tell me? What kind of trouble did you have? Did you have trouble with bed mobility? What kind of help? What kind of advice would someone been able to give you that would have helped, do you think?
Right. I mean, that's actually exactly what would have been really helpful at that time. You know, the just body positioning to get in and out of bed. You know, the interesting thing was that it kind of happened so subtly that it didn't seem like it was changing that quickly, even though it was. So, but if I had known all those things about the body positioning, that would have been really helpful. You know, on the slide here, it asks, you know, what would have been helpful to know. And the other thing was what we've already talked about a little bit, was the difficulties in what the patient can have in understanding how to move. So, you know, you talked about that, Ron, a little bit about the using the fewer words and using little hand cues. And so that was the kind of thing that I finally ended up doing. When she was still able to walk up and down the stairs, she was having so much trouble distinguishing between left and right that she actually, you would think that if you didn't really remember which was your left and which was your right, you'd get it right half the time. And she actually got it wrong about 90% of the time. I would say, okay, we're gonna step up with your right leg, and she would do her left leg all the time. So, but then I discovered this whole thing about actually just using a light touch. So I would say, go up with this leg, and I would just lightly touch her on her right leg. And then now let's step up with the other leg. So those kind of things, I wish I had known that in advance, and that would have been really helpful. Some things that were particularly hard were really sort of convincing her that she couldn't do certain physical things, like get out of the bed safely, just to get up and go to the bathroom, even when she had the walker available. But even harder, I think, was admitting to myself that there was a point that she couldn't do certain things. Because again, like what I had said before about how she was really the same person and had the same demeanor. So there was this element of denial going on for myself that it was like I couldn't believe that this was really not working. And so, you know, that kind of led to the thing that one of the things I was most worried about was if she would fall and injure herself. Fortunately, that never happened. She fell a number of times, but she never was injured. And especially there was a point at which she had developed some blood clots. So she was on blood thinning drugs. And so if you fall and you're on a blood thinning drug, that can be disastrous for you. So I was really worried about that. And fortunately, things worked out, and that never happened. That it was that big of a problem. So anyway, I think I'm going to hand it back to Ron to talk about some of these transfers.
Okay, thanks, Marty. So I when we talk about transfers, doing a transition to a standing position, or moving from a wheelchair to the bed, or a standard chair to a bed. Same thing applies that we looked at with bed mobility. I want to have a plan. I want to think through how it is. Do I want to help this person stand up if she's having a hard time standing, or what is the transition from the wheelchair to the bed, and break down that transition from step by step, instead of just thinking about the destination. Well, I want her butt on the bed, her butt on the wheelchair. I want to think through. Okay, let's look at the process. What is the process? And if I analyze that a little bit, I'll have a plan on how I get someone to stand up, or how I get them from one surface to the other. And so when we watch this video vignette in a little bit, I'll talk you through what I'm thinking here. The other thing is, when it's really hard, when it gets to the point where you just think this is a little bit dodgy, this is just not safe, then I think considering using some other devices is the way to go. Sliding boards we'll use sometimes, which you kind of use as almost like a bridge between one surface and another, or even mechanical lifts or Hoyer lifts. I think both of those items can sometimes be a little intimidating for a family or even a patient, but they can be a lifesaver in terms of the level of assist and the level of anxiety that decreasing the level of anxiety of just getting a transfer down, just getting up into the wheelchair. A Hoyer lift can allow someone to get up out of bed reasonably safely, who would maybe not be able to get up out of bed at all throughout the day. So let's take a look. We're going to imagine that Asa here is weak, not very strong, but not terribly weak, and can still stand up a little bit with some help. So let's take a look at what she looks like, and I'll talk you through the process. So first, I'm going to have her stand up, and she's leaning backwards. I want to bring her forward, scoot her forward, hip or pelvis, and my other hand goes to her pelvis. I'm stabilizing her from her shoulders so she doesn't fall backwards. Thinking about this, I'm thinking, well, if she can still push up with her hands, I'd like for her hands to be up here on the wheelchair. If she's weak in one hand, I may not do that. She's got a gait belt around her, so I have something to hang on to just in case. Now, for her to really stand up, she needs to lean forward. And if I don't let her lean forward, she can't stand up. And there I'm pushing her back, and I'm not letting her stand up. So if I'm going to help someone to stand up who's a little bit weak, I need to get her forward. But I have to be careful right there, so she's able to come way far forward. I can help her stand all the way up. Lead with her head forward, and then lead with her head coming back down. So she leans forward, standing up. She leans forward, sitting back down. Got her, my hands on her pelvis, big white hands, and kind of helping her get that posture forward, so her center of gravity is in front of her, so she can do that. I got to watch where I'm at. So if I'm sitting right in front of her, hang on, just wait till she sits down here. So if I'm not careful, if I'm sitting right in front of her, we're going to butt heads. So if you look, I think we do this next. There we go. So if I'm not careful, if I get my head right in front of her, she can't lean forward. So she's going to go to the bed this time. So her head's going to go way over to her right. It's going to go over towards my shoulder, and her butt's going to go the opposite direction. So if you watch, so head goes one way, and her bottom goes the other direction. That's helping her with a transfer. If I have her head going the same direction, she's going to be unstable. So I bring my hair around. I'm thinking how I want this. Hand can go onto the armrest. It might go onto my leg. It might go onto the seat of the chair. Head goes one way, bottom goes the other, and look how far forward she is. If I don't let her come forward, if I don't have her head going the opposite direction, she's going to be a lot heavier. It's going to be a lot harder to make that happen. like a silent movie. We should have had a little captions in here and a little Charlie Chaplin music, I guess, next time. Head way far forward, up, and I'm guiding her. I'm not lifting. I'm trying to do as little lifting as I can, and I'm making her do as much of the work as I can, because the more she does, the less I have to do. And I can do the standing up too. I don't have to be sitting down. Forward. And we're just shifting back and forth to kind of show how much. And I can even reach over. She's really weak. I can actually reach over and guide her that way. There you go. She's where she needs to be. So on the bed, happy to be there. So that's basic transfers to stand. That's how we usually teach people to move from surface to surface when they're weak and we're worried about them falling and they don't quite have the strength to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about getting on the floor recoveries. As Marty said, his wife fell a few times and luckily she wasn't injured. Asa and I find that our patients fall at a fairly high clip. So we see a lot of falls with our neurological patients, our stroke patients, our brain injury patients. I'd like to say that doesn't happen, but it does. Our lawyers would like to say that doesn't happen or think that doesn't happen as much, but it does. We just assume that our patients are most likely going to fall. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But from a therapist standpoint, we stand back and say, okay, well, if you're going to fall, we may as well just practice getting on the floor. So most of my patients, I'll get on the floor in the first week that I see them, if it's at all safe to do it. And a lot of my patients will get on the floor, and that's where they'll do their exercises. And they'll say, well, I've got this nice bed, I can do my exercises over here. I says, no, you can get on the floor pretty easily, or your spouse can help you. I'll show them how. I want you down on the floor every day. And we do that because if they're practicing getting on the floor every day, there's going to be a lot less anxiety when they do land themselves there. And ideally, they're going to have a plan on how to get themselves back up if they haven't gotten hurt. The other thing is getting on the floor is a great place to do your yoga, do your exercises, play with the dog, play with the grandkids. So getting on the floor has a lot of merit to it. So we're going to take a look at what we need to do. You have to imagine that this is a sofa and not a therapy plinth in a gym somewhere. We didn't have access to a sofa to do the videos. This is the most common way I teach people to get back up off the floor. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Let's take a look and see what this looks like. So again, we've chosen Asa to be the victim, so she gets to be the person to get on the floor. She'd be sitting a little bit lower. She's on the sofa for sure. So I'm at her pelvis, so where I have a lot of stability, a lot of control. I've got my gait belt on her, my yellow gait belt, kind of looking at where her feet are. She's going to go off onto the floor to her side. So she's going to get her strong arm all the way down there. I'm going to be at her pelvis. Her left arm there is her weak arm this time. Come down onto her left leg. I control her down, get the right leg down there, and then she's going to roll over onto her side. I could take her to her left side if I'm watching her shoulder very carefully, or we could actually go the opposite direction like we're going to do here and come on around, walk around, and all the way down. And oftentimes, if my patients aren't able to walk real well, that's how I'll get them down onto the floor, and usually sliding off of the sofa. That tends to be a little bit easier. So now she'll do her yoga, play with the dog, whatever she wants to do down there. But we're going to get back up. Come over to the side. She's going to come up onto her strong arm. She's going to bend her knees. I'm going to get at her pelvis because I want to control it on the way up. So up into a crawling position would be next. She can use that left hand. I'll have her put it on the floor. If she can't, I won't. She's parallel to the sofa or to the surface we're going to. So she'll get both feet over there. We'll walk them over there a little bit. I'll help her a little bit. She's going to put her strong arm up there onto the sofa. She's going to bring her strong leg out in front of her. I'm going to hold her, alley-oop, and bottom onto the sofa. That's how I usually teach people to get back up, and our caregivers how to help someone back up off of the floor. If you say, well, I don't have my sofa here right next to me, I fell in the middle of the floor somewhere, then we'll teach them how to get back up onto their wheelchair, or you can bring a chair with you. If they're able to walk, we'll have them actually, usually instead of getting off to the side, we'll actually have them walk up to the sofa or the bed. Well, if they're using a walker, we'll pull the walker out of the way. That's me demonstrating pulling the walker out of the way. Get their weak hand or strong hand, weak hand down there. They'll come down with their weaker foot first. So she's going to pull that weak foot back way behind her, even a little bit further. And then she'll slide down onto that weak leg. I'll kind of hold her pelvis. If I need to stabilize her, she'll bring the other hand down. And then I'll usually get someone's stronger arm down, and she'll slide down right to her strong arm and onto the floor. If this was our living room, well, it's not my, if this was their living room, the patient's living room, I probably wouldn't have that chair sitting there, and I'd have them just roll all the way down. This being a therapy gym, we don't have as much room to work with. So we'll get that chair out of the way. So she's going to get back up, or we're going to leave her there. I'm not sure which. So we're going to bend her legs up just like she did on the bed earlier. Weak hand is right there on her belly, so I know where it is, so it's less likely to get hurt. And she's going to roll over towards her stronger side, her right side in this case. I'm going to help her from her that weak hand. And I wanted her knees bent a little bit more because that'll be easier for her to come up onto her knees. I get at her pelvis. I don't want to lift her. I'm kind of guiding her again, not wanting to do a whole lot of work. Crawl over to the sofa, get one hand, the other hand up there. Hold her stable and put her gait belt in her pocket so we don't trip over that and land on the floor again. And then strong leg out in front. Stabilize, and 1, 2, 3. Make sure that weak leg foot goes all the way on the floor, and then around to the bed and have a seat. And we'll do this. I'll have the patient get on the floor every day if I can do that using this technique. If the caregiver is willing to learn that technique, and again, if my patient accidentally falls on the floor, they got a plan. They know the technique, they know the strategy on how to get back up if they haven't been hurt. And as Marty mentioned, his wife fell a few times, no injuries. Most of the time our patients fall, we usually don't see them getting hurt, or if they do, it's a minor injury. So most of the time, as long as they have a plan and they've been practicing getting up, they can actually get up without having to call the fire department or the family brigade and everyone else. Especially if they've had that practice and that training. So I'm going to hand off to Asa here to talk about getting up and down stairs.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So this is kind of a big deal because talking about stairs and doing the work on stairs is usually PT territory, and I'm the OT getting the opportunity to talk about this evening. So here we go. Stairs. Obviously, navigating stairs can really be a daunting task for caregivers because stairs are steep, and this is not a place where you want your loved one getting into trouble or you getting into trouble yourself in terms of falling or stumbling. So it can be intimidating. So how can you keep your loved ones safe as they go up and down stairs? Well, the first thing really to think about and anticipate is just the level of energy and strength that your loved one has, and going up and down a set of stairs at the start of the day can be very different than negotiating stairs at the end of the day after a full day of activities. So just planning ahead and anticipating the level of fatigue can be enormously helpful. And also just in terms of what Marty talked about earlier, as your loved one, just their function changes and if they get weaker and can't really negotiate in terms of moving their body, keeping that in mind if you have stairs in your home. So maybe you need to think about moving where they sleep, and just thinking about those things ahead of time can just reduce the amount of stress. So stairs require enough strength and energy both for going up and for going down safely. You have to have enough strength and energy to push through the leg as you go up, but also to control the movement when you're going downstairs to prevent collapsing. So, and of course, we're all probably more worried about falling downstairs. So, if you have a railing, that is a huge benefit. And some stairs in homes have railings on both sides, but frequently you only have them on one side. So what usually happens is that your loved one will be supporting themselves on one side if they're just using one arm, and you will be supporting them on their free side. There's also a sidestepping technique that you'll see in the video that we'll take a look at in a little bit. And with sidestepping, your loved one can hold on to the railing with both hands, and that can feel safer for some people. The other thing to keep in mind, I think, is taking breaks as needed. So even if your loved one is getting tired in the middle of a stair or a flight of stairs, don't hurry them up, because I think that is when a lot of trouble seems to happen. People get stressed and want to get the task over, but if you need to just stand there for a bit, or even help your loved one sit down and take a break, do that rather than stress and hurry through the task. The worst thing, if you lower your loved one into a sitting position and they have to bump on their bottom down or up the stairs, it's not the end of the world, and you're a lot safer in that position than if you're collapsing from a standing position. So the cardinal rule on stairs for a person who has a weaker side or leg is up with the good, down with the bad. And you'll see this in the video. So it's a step 2 pattern, and I'll talk through as we're looking at the video. So Ron, are you able to start the video for me?
I am.
Great, thank you. Okay, so here I am demonstrating holding on to the railing safely, and I'm going to be going up with what is supposed to be my stronger leg. So you'll see me do, yes, obviously if you have 2 railings, you can support your loved one from the back and just hold on to their pelvis if they can hold on to both railings. But up with strong foot and follow with a weaker leg. So it's a step 2 pattern. You're not stepping through, because that requires a lot more strength and energy and balance. They can also hold on with both hands on one side with the same step 2 pattern. Coming down, now you're going to lead with the weaker leg, because you're going to kind of break the movement or control the movement with your strong leg. So you're leading with the weak leg, control with a strong leg. So that is the pattern going down, especially if your loved one has a weaker side. But this is also an energy conservation technique. To just do the step 2 pattern requires less energy. Here's the sidestepping technique. So the person can face the railing, keep both hands on there, and you're stepping up. So if there is a weaker leg, that should be the one to follow as you're going up. Same strategy. You go up with a strong leg. if you can, if you have a railing on the right side. So this can be a little bit of a challenge if you only have a railing on one side. Down with the weaker leg. So you're controlling the movement with your strong uphill leg. Now we're going to be showing how you as the caregiver is going to be supporting your loved one on stairs. So you'll be on their hands-free side, by supporting the person can hold onto your hand, and you can kind of support underneath their forearm, and also holding or supporting your loved one at the pelvis and the back. If you have a gait belt, you can have a grip on that. So you see that Ron is kind of, he's not pulling on my hand or anything like that. He's just kind of providing a little bit of a semi-stable support on that side. So the person will feel more stable, not having something to hold on to, or now you have something to hold on to with both hands. And the same thing goes here, simple commands, step up. I love that Marty talked about the tactile cue, just a little bit of a light touch on when you want the leg to move, if your loved one has a difficulty just processing what you're saying. So the tactile cues can be really, really helpful. Here, Ron is going to show you may need to help them place their foot properly if they can't place it far enough out on the step so that they can fit their other foot, but that might be helpful. Or you need to just ask them to maybe move their foot a little bit so there's enough space to come down safely. And here's the scenario where the person might just be getting tired in the middle of the stairs. Help lower them into a seating position. They're safe. If they need to go down this way, you can also support them at the hips in this position. The most important thing is that neither one of you tumbles down the stairs. So this is a strategy for safety and for energy conservation. And you can actually go upstairs by bumping yourself up this way as well, if needed. So those are the techniques for stairs. As I said, planning ahead, is I would say the most important thing. And especially, as you're looking at weeks out in time, if you need to maybe plan for a different place in the house for your loved one to have their bed or something to avoid stairs eventually, that might be something to think about. Okay, Ron, if you can go to the next slide, thank you. So now we're on to car transfers. This is a very exciting transfer as well. If you're going to transport your loved one in a car, you will both benefit from practicing this ahead of time. If not for anything else, just to take the stress out of this a little bit, because it can be tricky. It depends on the size and design of the car, how much space, how tall the seat is, and so on. So just practicing it together will take the stress out of it a bit. Your considerations will have to be, do you want to transport them in the front seat or in the back seat, depending on which is more comfortable for them or safer. How easy is it to get them into the front seat versus the back, and so on. And you may have to consider the airbag placements as well for safety reasons. Obviously, if something happens and the airbag gets deployed, it can be a hazard if your loved one has certain medical conditions. So it's just something to keep in mind. You just want to try it ahead of time to take the stress out and see how difficult it is. But we're going to watch this transfer. So this is, if you can roll the video, Ron, this is a transfer assuming that the person cannot walk and get into the car themselves, obviously, because then they would. But here, I'm playing a person who is still able to bear some weight on my legs, so I'm not completely unable to help out, but I'm going to need a lot of help. So Ron is taking off the leg rests. That's really important, and getting them out of the way so that they're not, they're not presenting a tripping hazard. And then locking the wheelchair, very important. Rolling the window down and the car door is helpful. And then scooting your loved one forward like this. Again, this is very similar to the transfer that Ron showed before, transferring onto the bed. Same technique, making sure that any arms that are weak are in the lap so that they don't get caught somewhere. My head is going to go away from, so to my right. I'm not going to be looking where I'm going. So Ron is instead going to control at my pelvis and move my bottom into the car seat as I'm leaning forward. And making sure that my head doesn't hit the car on the way in, and then keeping his hand on my shoulder blade in the back so I don't fall backwards if I'm weak and can't really control the way I'm sitting. And here I might need help with the legs getting into the car. And then if needed, you can push the car seat back here if you need more, if your loved one needs more space. And then obviously buckle in, and then you're on your way. You can go on an outing. So that's getting in. Now we're going to get back out. So a lot of the same principles. Open the car door. Keep that window down on the car door because it can provide a space for a handhold if needed. It's not going to be needed in this transfer, but for somebody who can stand up with a walker, if you're helping them, it might actually be really helpful to have the window down. Ron is pointing to this little latch where the car door locks. There's a little tool that you can order on the internet that you can put in there, and it functions as a little handle. And it's a great way if your loved one needs a handhold to push off on to get up. But here we're just gonna do the same type of transfer again. Ron is putting the leg rests away, locking the wheelchair, and putting it in a place where he has enough space to move. So not too close, because then he won't have enough space to maneuver. Now he needs to help with the legs. Just move the legs out and help me face outward and feet flat on the ground, and provide some support behind the back at the shoulder blades again so that I'm not falling backwards. Then you can move the wheelchair a little bit closer, and it's angled a little bit. It's not completely perpendicular to the car. And it's the same way he's pointing. My head is going to go the other way. So my bottom will come toward the wheelchair. My head is facing the other way. He's not lifting. He's guiding my hips into the wheelchair. And you can ask your loved one to, reach for the armrests if they're able to do so. And that's the car transfer. So this is for somebody who can support enough weight on their legs that they're not collapsing with this. If your loved one is weaker than that, the option with the slide board that Ron spoke about earlier could be used in a car transfer. It is much more daunting and sort of challenging, and I would recommend training with a professional who knows how to do that, so that you could get confident with that type of transfer if you need to do it. The car cane grab bar is on the slide. It's mentioned on here, and that can be a really good option if your loved one needs something to push off on. And it's just a little tool that you can buy pretty cheaply on the internet. Yeah, so that is car transfers. So we can move to the next slide. I'm just going to talk a little bit about quality of life. You know, this is you're in a very challenging situation with your loved one right now. This is a tough situation to be in with somebody facing this type of diagnosis. Quality of life is a big, important focus for you and your loved one, and it's something that we as rehab professionals like to focus on to assist you so that you can actually enjoy life and find a way of doing your daily routine that works for you. So finding a routine and a daily rhythm that works for both you and your loved one is going to be a big priority. These mobility skills are really important because they increase safety both for you and your loved one and decrease the risk of injury. So getting confident and really getting these skills down will be a good priority. But besides that, you know, really prioritizing what you want to do with your loved one, what your loved one wants to do, and what needs to happen in your daily life is really key to improving quality of life. If you feel that any of these techniques are too daunting or hard, ask for a home evaluation by a PT or OT. That's what we rehab professionals do. There are a lot of different organizations. It's going to depend on your insurance, but it can be enormously helpful. We professionals know how to do a lot of these things. We can take a lot of the stress out of the situation. So if you feel that you're in over your head at any point, ask for help with that. So focus on enjoying life in ways that are meaningful and important to both you and the person you care for. We hope that these mobility skills and tips will enable you to do so. So now I'm going to hand over to Marty again. So Ron, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Yeah, so Marty, I'm going to hand over to you to talk about any piece of advice that you might have for the caregivers.
Yes, thank you, Asa. So yeah, you know, there are a couple things that's all kind of in the same category, and it really relates to what Asa was just talking about, which was the quality of life. And it's kind of a theme of planning ahead. So, you know, one of the main things that is to be aware that the cognitive declines that happen may well happen, and maybe they are almost certain to happen in some cases before the physical decline. That's certainly what happened with Pamela, because I didn't even realize what was going on. One of the big light bulb moment for me was she was still walking okay. Sometimes she would use a walker and everything, but we were struggling with this whole thing with the stairs and all this. And we were having PTs and OTs visit the house every so often. And a therapist was over one time and was working with Pamela. And at one point handed her a sheet of paper and a pen and said, draw the face of a clock. And so, you know, that shouldn't be too hard, especially actually in Pamela's case. At that moment, there was actually a clock that she was almost looking at, but I don't know if she was able to look at it or not. So she draws a circle, and then she started to put the numbers in of the clock face, and she started where 12 is, and she wrote all 12 numbers between what is actually 12 and the 9 position. So in that upper left quarter, and she thought that was what a clock looks like. And so this light bulb went on. It's like, oh, this makes sense now. She seems like herself, but there are things going on in her brain that just don't connect what her hands are doing or what her body's doing with what her brain wants them to do. So that's a big, big part of the mobility piece. So as far as planning ahead, one of the pieces of advice I said, you know, talk about this stuff early with your loved one. You can't talk about it too early, I think. And like Osa was just saying, get professionals to help you. There were times when we did have professionals come in and help, and that was great. Keep in mind, and I have a niece who's a physical therapist as well. The PTs and OTs are highly trained professionals, and they really know how to do this stuff. So utilize that skill whenever you can, and that'll definitely make things better. Really, when you have these conversations with your loved one, really focus on, this is about quality of life. And so, anything you do, this is not to make things difficult or anything. It's the opposite. It's to make things better. We were talking about the Hoyer lift, and once Pamela was completely immobile, I had the Hoyer lift, figured out how to use it, and I was able to get her into a wheelchair, and so we could go around for a walk around the neighborhood at least twice a day, go out to the garden, sit in the garden. She would sometimes go out there and take a nap when she was in the wheelchair that we had. And in fact, speaking of the wheelchair, the other piece of advice is to, whatever equipment you're going to need, get it early, because sure enough, once you need it, it'll be like a Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, and you won't have any way to get what you need. So whether it's a walker or a cane, if they can use a cane, a wheelchair. We had a high back wheelchair for Pamela that was great, that I didn't even know existed until a friend told me about one that reclined. So we could get her in the wheelchair, take her for a lap around the neighborhood, and then if she wanted to take a nap outside when the weather was nice, we could just recline the wheelchair, and it was comfortable for her to do that. So there's all this equipment. And of course, there's the Hoyer lift, which is the greatest invention ever invented in history. Practice with those things. And it'll really improve your quality of life, both for your loved one and for you. And then final thing I just wanted to say is not so much advice, but just some encouragement. And that is, you can do this. It seems like a lot when we looked at all those things. And then of course, as your loved one has different things that they can and can't do, there are going to be different things that you're going to need to do. You can do it. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you get the help, because getting the help and learning the techniques and everything, it makes the whole process a lot easier. And it can be a lot less difficult if you do those things in advance. So plan ahead, have these conversations, and get help. So I think that's it. And I think I'm now going to turn it over back to Elle.
Thank you so much, Marty. I think it's really good, really helpful for everyone to have that point of view from you. So thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists for these tips today. So we'll now begin our next and final section, our Q&A session with the panelists. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if you haven't already, to submit a question for this, please just chat me directly. So to Elle Woodall in the chat box, and I'll just kind of read them as they come. So I'll go ahead and start. We have one question here, kind of a long one. My husband is the patient. He has some weakness on the left that sometimes seems better, sometimes worse. I want him to get stronger, and I know that doing his exercises is important, but getting him to do it is a battle. I try to get him to do PT exercises and go on walks, but half the time he's too tired to participate in anything in the evening. I wonder if it's worth it to get his strength back, if it's affecting his sleep and fatigue. So I don't know who would want to answer this question, maybe Ron or Asa.
I'll start tackling it, and I'll say that my doctor tells me I have to do stretching for my ankle all the time, and I don't do it. And I'm a PT, so there you go. It's hard. It's really hard, and I think that Osa and we oftentimes are brought in a point where people have had an acute decline. So that is, they've gone to the hospital, they've had a surgical procedure with their glioblastoma for it, or they've had a seizure or some reason where they've had a real acute decline in their function, and is like, well, they come to us and they want us to make them better. What can I do to get better? And we'll do what we can. And I think you can drive some improvement, but we also know that this is that ultimately with this diagnosis, you're not going to be successful, right? You are going to lose ground. And I think it's important if the person wants to do their exercises, willing to do it, that's great. But you got to make it fun. You got to make it worthwhile. I know Asa and I had a patient not too long ago with a similar diagnosis, and we were able to incorporate a lot of stuff in his backyard. He enjoyed going out to his basketball court that he had on the backyard, or a sports court, and we were able to incorporate, not necessarily playing one-on-one with his son, but a lot of fun stuff, and that was his exercise, not leg lifts. And I think that's important. Going for a walk every day, if you can kind of get someone to buy into that, even halfway around the block, or a quarter of the way around the block, or even up and down the street in front of the house, that can be your exercise. It doesn't have to be terribly boring. What do you think, Osa?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly. Basically, it should be fun. I think, you try to focus on things that add to quality of life. So if it's a walk somewhere, if it's just around the neighborhood and your husband enjoys it, that would be great. Also, if it's at the end of the day that you're trying to do it, he might just be more fatigued than if there's an opportunity to do it earlier in the day. You might have more success. But like Ron said, it's also easier to get. We get our patients to do exercises because that's why we're there. So there are few patients that are going to decline us, but it's much harder when it's a family member. So focus on your quality of life more. If it's a big struggle, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you can find something fun to do, then it's a big win. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So our second question is, how do I know when it is time to suggest that the patient not use the stairs anymore? So maybe when they're too impaired to even use the techniques we went over today. Osa or Ron?
Well, it's that's a tough question. And as Marty was pointing out, that a lot of people who have some cognitive decline oftentimes have some judgment executive functioning decline as well. And sometimes our patients don't recognize that this is as much of a safety concern as what it is. Sometimes our patients recognize it and they just don't want to give it up because they figure that is really giving in, and that might be that they may have decided that's the line in the sand that they're drawing. So it's a really, really tough call to make. Obviously, if they're truly unsafe, it's that someone has to intervene because someone's truly going to get hurt at that point, and you certainly aren't going to go anywhere with that. So there's no right or wrong, but we try to come up with as much of a safe. So we try to come up with as much. We try to provide that guidance when we're in there, but sometimes our patients won't listen to us or the family, and then we try to try to piece together as much of a safety strategy as we can. Osa, what do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was just going to refer back to what Marty said too, that if you have a discussion about this early, I think that was a great point, Marty, that, this is the type of thing to discuss early with your loved one, and say, when I, as your caregiver, start feeling really uncomfortable on the stairs, I don't want you to fall. I don't want to fall myself. Just addressing it, I think, will be helpful, because even if your loved one has some cognitive decline, if the discussion has been there, they're likely to be amenable to making a change, I think, at that stage.
I think planning ahead, what Marty said earlier too, is maybe you have that discussion with someone early on, and you say, listen, eventually you're going to get to the point where you can't go up and down these stairs. Yeah. And where can we set up, not what can we do? You say, where can we set up a bed downstairs? Because your bedrooms are upstairs. Do we have room to set up a full size or a queen size bed? Because we're going to share the bed, because we've done it for 30 years. Why, we're not, so do we have room to set this up? Are we going to close off the dining room? Does that make sense? Marty, what do you think?
Yeah, so I have some very specific experience with the whole stairs thing. So in my house, there's the main living area, and for the 2 bedrooms in the house, it's up 9 stairs. And then there's another room downstairs that's kind of like a TV room, family room type thing that's down 4 stairs. So there was a point that Pamela, I never felt that it was unsafe for her going up and down the stairs because I was always there with her. So that was never too big of a concern because we were both super careful. But she got to a point where she just didn't have the strength. And I specifically remember a couple times where she got to that last stair and she's like, I can't make it up the last stair. And she had to sit down, and then we had to do this whole thing, that Asa was demonstrating in the stair thing. And so she realized that she was not able to do that. So we were able to set up a bedroom in the downstairs room, create a bedroom down there. And for a while, when she was still walking, she could make it up and down 4 stairs. So she was able to get into the living room and be in the main living area of the house for some weeks when she was still able to move. Eventually, she was not able to get out of the bed at all herself. But so in her case, she kind of knew when she couldn't make it up and down anymore. And fortunately, we had an option to set up a bed in the other room.
I think. Yeah, it's really hard to have that conversation, but I think going back to what Asa said earlier, quality of life. Well, listen, you can either go up and down the stairs twice a day, 3 times a day, and be completely wiped out and have nothing left in the tank for the rest of the day, or we can make it out to the coffee shop, right? You can't do both, and sometimes it may come to that. That's decide what the quality of life. Do you want to go up and down the stairs, or do you want to have the energy to actually get out and do something? And a lot of our folks would rather go out and do something.
Yeah, and I would just add one other thing is that the question is like when is it that you don't use the stairs anymore? And I think to a degree, and it's hard with certain personalities, that might be involved. But the caregiver, I think you kind of have to put your foot down sometimes when it's a serious safety issue like that. I didn't have to because she realized she just didn't have the strength, but I was almost at a point of saying, you know what, this is not working. It's not safe. And we're moving you downstairs. I didn't have to do that, but I was prepared to do it if I needed to. And that's the main thing. That goes back to the quality of life. You don't want to be, in a cast because you broke your leg falling down the stairs or worse.
Thank you guys so much. We'll go on to the next question from a participant. This one says, if the patient's body size is larger than the caregiver, are there any modifications that you recommend for keeping them safe and assisting them in moving from location to location?
Asa, you want to tackle that one first?
I can, yeah. A lot of the techniques will be the same. When you're helping somebody move in bed, you want to just as much as you can, as long as they are able to use their legs and arms and everything, you want to use the tactile cues and that sort of guiding hands that Ron was talking about. You never want to really lift your loved one. That's when you can really get into trouble. You can injure yourself, and then you're not going to be able to take care of them anymore. So it's really important to use these techniques safely and well. And if you feel that your loved one is so weak and you're not able to move them safely, then I would recommend that you get help. But these techniques, you should be able to use them and move even somebody who is of a larger stature, both wider and taller than you, safely, as long as you do it according to the same way that Ron showed in the videos.
There is a skill set. There is a learning curve to figuring out how to make that work, and sometimes for someone, and sometimes what works for me or what works for Asa to help someone move doesn't work for someone else with a little bit different geometry, so to speak. So I did a couple of transfers with Asa in the video where I was sitting down. I did a few standing up. Your particular build may make it easier or harder to complete these sitting down or standing up. I think the other thing is to jump to those the Hoyer lift or the sliding board sooner than later if that's needed.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more coming in. I'll go just in order. The next one is, have the speakers found stair lifts to be safe and useful for people with neuro conditions?
Yes, it's sitting, you have to have a reasonably good sitting balance to use the stair lift. So that's number one, right? And most of them have some kind of seatbelt strap, and they have armrests on them a lot of times, so that you can utilize those. They tend to be quite expensive to install, to purchase and to install. You have to have the right architectural setup to make them really work. So we and a lot of times Asa and I find that funding and installation takes time. So sometimes people need them, and it's just if we want an insurance to fund them, or if we want to get somebody to install them in a reasonable amount of time, sometimes it's just not a workable thing. But yeah, they certainly can be useful. We don't use them as much just because of the time frame for getting them up and running. Marty, you have any thoughts on that?
We're talking about the mechanical stair lifts.
I
don't have any experience with that. I mean, in my specific case, we had the other option of creating a bedroom downstairs, and that worked great. So we never considered that. Sometimes
it depends on the rate of progression, right? So you may decide you want that, and by the time you have it, maybe the sitting balance isn't there, and you've spent a lot of money on that, whereas you could have spent money and time doing other things and setting up a room downstairs. So I'm not necessarily negative on them, but you want to kind of look at the bigger picture sometimes.
Yeah, thank you both again. Okay, on to the next question. This says, could Marty please describe the use of a Hoyer lift and why he found it so useful?
Yeah, so the Hoyer lift, it's basically a crane. It's a crane for people. And what it has is this sort of a mesh hammock that there's a certain way to hook these very heavy duty straps onto the lifting mechanism. And basically there's a crank. Well, I've seen some electric ones too. In fact, I think there was an electric one in one of the hospitals that Pamela was in, maybe. But it's just it's like a hand pump thing that then lifts the person up into the air, and then you can wheel them around. It has these wheels on it. It takes a little bit of practice to maneuver it around, and then the whole person can be rotated and then sort of dropped into a wheelchair or onto a regular chair. Or the best one that we did was so for Pamela, she lost her core strength. She could not sit in a chair without sliding out of it, just a regular chair. So if we put her in a wheelchair or a chair or something, it had to be tilted back. So I had a way to use this ramp that I had made to tilt the chair. It was totally just a little bit. And then I was able to use the Hoyer lift to put her into the wheelchair or the chair, and then use the gate belt to secure her into the chair or the wheelchair. Well, I realized that we have a bunch of these cheap plastic fake Adirondack chairs, and the angle of those chairs is exactly the angle that was comfortable for her to sit. So I actually, a couple times, I lifted her up with the Hoyer lift, rolled it out the back door, across the backyard to our patio by the garden, and put her down in one of the Adirondack chairs, which great quality of life thing, because she could just sit in a regular chair without being strapped into it, and just enjoy, a glass of iced tea and sit and enjoy the outdoors. So, but the Hoyer lift was, like I said, it took a little while, like a couple days to really get the hang of using it. But once I did, I was able to operate it by myself. They usually recommend that 2 people operate it. But if you really pay attention to what you're doing and take your time and you're safe and everything, it can be done with 1 person. And it was a lifesaver. It was one of the, like I said, it was the greatest invention ever invented.
There are a number of different, Hoyer is a brand actually. So there's a number of different mechanical lifts out there from different companies. And some of them have different design for the sling. And actually Hoyer makes a bunch of different designs for the sling itself. So if you get something and you just get the heebie-jeebies trying to use that and you think this is not working for me, if that hasn't been if it's a rental, certainly, sometimes you can look at other, you can swap it around. One might work for you, another may not work for you, but another might. So sometimes the designs are a little bit different, as Marty says. Some are all manual, they have a crank on them with a hydraulic system. They look almost like an engine hoist if you've ever worked on cars. And some of them are semi-electric and some of them are fully electric. So there's a variety of different lifts that are available out there and different sling types.
Great. Thank you both again. It looks like we have 2 more here, which is perfect for our timing. The next one says, my wife can't see anything on the left. Is there anything else I should be doing?
That sounds like an OSA question, an OT question.
Yeah, just repeat that quickly. She cannot see on the left.
Right. Is there anything else she should be doing, or he should be doing? I'm sorry.
Well, you can try if she's having a hard time. So sitting on her left side, so that when you're with her and talking to her, so that she has to kind of but that's. So if you're concerned about her just attending to that side, you can do that. But otherwise, obviously, just being aware that, from a safety standpoint, protecting her if she's walking, making her aware of things on her left. She can use a scanning technique to really pay attention to her left. We usually call it like a lighthouse scanning. So you're kind of imagining a lighthouse, how the light goes around, and really sort of turning your head and scanning all the way to the left before you're moving and making sure there are no obstacles in the way. There are also ways to, if she's having a hard time kind of seeing everything, if she's eating or something like that, and maybe just paying attention to half the table, you can use things like putting some bright tape on the left side of the table, and it's a training thing to just sort of like, okay, make sure you're looking all the way until you see the orange tape, say, on the left-hand side. And that way, once she gets into that habit, she would be able to do that scanning, provided her cognition is such that she can remember to do techniques like that. So those are a few different things. There are a lot of OTs that work with visual deficits. So if it becomes a big problem, that's another thing with if you have like a home health therapist come out, they can work on very specific strategies and things like that to help out with that deficit.
Yeah, in fact, that's exactly what one of Pamela's symptoms was. She could not see anything to the left of center. Yeah. And an occupational therapist came to the house one time, and one of the things she did, she took a whole bunch of little sticky notes with different numbers and letters on them and put them randomly all over the back of one of the doors. And that was one of the exercises that she had Pamela do, is she'd have me just call out numbers. Sometimes it was on the right side, sometimes the left side. And that really sort of trained her to do that scanning, that sort of lighthouse scanning that Asa was just talking about. And it was really effective. So there are all these little tricks that, and ways to train a person that has that issue that the therapist can show you.
Thank you. And then another one for you, Marty, says, how were you able, if you were able, to maintain your own quality of life when managing this level of impairment, or any suggestions on that?
Yeah, so the main thing is to get help, ask for help. And I wasn't ever the type to ask for help, but I had to do it, and I did it, and it was the best thing I ever did. There was a period of time, so I was coaching at the high school. I was the head track coach at the local high school, and this is when Pamela really started to decline and getting close to where she was going to start hospice care. And I got to a point where I couldn't leave her alone. So I just put out the word to all the parents on the track team. We had 100 kids on the track team, and I got I got one student who had joined the track team but had quit the track team for some reason. She actually came to the house. I got somebody every day of the week to come to the house during the time when I was at practice, and to help her. And at that time, she wasn't terribly immobile, so she was able to get up and walk with her walker. So basically that person that came all they had to do was just sort of remind her to use the walker, and just a few simple safety steps. So that was, and then when it got a lot worse, again, it was recommended that I should get somebody to be here overnight in case Pamela needed help at night, so I could get sleep. And that was great. I had somebody come 3 nights a week. And all she did was just sit in the room with Pamela. Pamela needed anything in the middle of the night, and that way I could sleep without worrying about her. So really ask for help. There's actually tons of help available for anything you might imagine, and that's a real key.
I think that's a common question we get from caregivers. How do I find time for myself? So yeah, I think that's very important.
I think Asa and I find that sometimes with patients. So we typically, we'll see patients for 6 to 8 weeks. Both of us will go in for a couple sessions a week, and we always like the families to be there, at least initially, the primary caregiver, so we can do any kind of training. But when after a little while, once we kind of got things moving pretty well, there are times when we'll just tell the spouse, tell the caregiver they need to get out. They need to go have a cup of coffee. We got this. And a lot of times they're reluctant to do that. And I think it's important that when you have those few moments or even larger periods of time, to take advantage of that and not to feel guilty about taking a few minutes for yourself. I don't know, what do you think, Marty? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I was telling you, I had all this parade of parents come in, and actually one of the people who came in once a week was my assistant coach's wife, who was a friend of Pamela's also. And so after the season was over, I didn't really need her to be there anymore. Because I was home, she kept coming anyway, and she insisted on coming. She said, "I'm going to spend a couple hours with Pamela. You go off and do whatever you want to do." And that was great. So I had that. And then a little bit later, there was, through the hospice company, they had these volunteers who would just come and sit with the patient while you just went off and did whatever you want to do. And so I really made a point of taking advantage of every single thing that was offered. And that turned out to be a really smart thing to do. I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. So I think that's all the time we have for questions today. I just want to say thank you once again to Ron, Asa, and Marty for being here with us. This is a hugely important topic that I think people have wanted information on for a while, and you all have been so helpful this evening in each your own way. So thank you. So I will end it here. Please note any unanswered questions will be answered via email if any pop up at the end of this chat here. And in that same email, in the next couple of weeks, I will also be sending you all a recording of the webinar. So in case you ever want to refer back to those videos or tips, you can have that on hand, and it'll also be posted on our website. And then just stay tuned for future invites to our caregiver webinars in the Planning Ahead series. You're on our email list, so look out for those. Our next one should be in the fall, around November. And that's it. We wish you all well, and thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you soon.